Hi and welcome to cheapbeginnerdrumsets.com. This is a video series with information on the buying of your very first cheap beginner drum set. My name is Ross Crowley, educator and performer of the drum set, and you're watching part 2 of the series, Acoustic versus Electronic Drum Sets. I'd also encourage you, if you haven't already done so, to watch part 1, Where Do I Begin? So there's basically two main types of drum set. First is the acoustic drum set, which has been around for a long time and still quite popular with a lot of students. And the second is the electronic drum set, which hasn't been around for as long, but certainly becoming more and more popular. So I thought I'd define the two different types of drum sets, starting with the acoustic drum set. So an acoustic drum set is a collection of drums, cymbals, and other percussion hardware that produce acoustic sound vibrations when struck. They are often conveniently positioned for a single performer to play at. And an electronic drum kit set is a collection of electronic sensory pads that, when struck, trigger a sound response in the form of a waveform generation or sampled sound playback. A waveform generation is basically the sound module generating sounds as it goes from scratch, and a sampled sound is basically a pre-recorded sound that then gets played back from the module. It's arranged in the same manner as an acoustic drum set. That means all the techniques that you would employ to play on the acoustic drum set can be played on the electronic drum set as well. So which one is better? Both of these types of drum sets have both positive and negative attributes to them. So it really comes down to which one is better suited to your needs. So we'll talk some positives and negatives now for both types of drum sets, starting with positives for the acoustic drum sets. They're generally cheaper. They're generally more aesthetically pleasing to the eye. They have nicer finish. Again, that's my opinion, but it seems to be quite a common opinion with a lot of people. They have no need for electricity, so that means they can be played in areas that don't have electricity. They have no ugly or annoying wires, which is pretty self-explanatory. You have direct control over the tunings, so you can tune each individual drum as you'd like, as opposed to the electronic drum kit where you can't so much tune the drum. All you can do is manipulate the sound that's already there. They're less prone to breakage, and while they still do have moving parts, all of those moving parts are all mechanical and they're not sensory. So it's been my experience that they're less prone to breakage. Flexible setup options. Each piece of the drum kit is fairly independent of each other, with the exception of the toms that are mounted, and that they don't have to be plugged into anything, so they're pretty free to be moved. It has a superior feel and response, so that means that very small hits you'll still get a sound, as opposed to the electronic drum kit where very small hits won't actually trigger a response at all. And all drumming techniques can be achieved. This sort of fits in with the previous statement. On the acoustic drum kit, techniques such as brush playing and scraping cymbals and things like that, you'll actually get those techniques will work, as opposed to the electronic drum kit. Some of those techniques can't be achieved. So we'll talk some negatives now. Loudness issues, that's a very common one. Obviously the drums are a very loud instrument. There are opportunities to quieten it down by putting some pads on, but again that's going to have an impact on the feel of playing on the drums. Replacement skins, again that's pretty explanatory. If you're hitting a skin repeatedly over and over that's pretty thin, over time it's going to warp and it's going to have implications on the sound of the drum kit. They need to be tuned regularly, especially if you don't replace the skins regularly. As I said, it's going to warp the skin and you're going to have some sound issues. Harsher on drumsticks. Drumsticks are generally made of wood, and particularly when you're hitting cymbals that are made of metal, out of that battle, metal always wins, and so over time the drumsticks are going to suffer. And of course there are techniques that you can employ to minimize the damage on your sticks, but it's just the reality of drum kit playing on an acoustic kit. Susceptible to damage, particularly when you're moving the drum set, particularly because it's got a nice finish. They can get scratches on it, they can get holes in the skins, you can get dents in your cymbals, so they're more susceptible to damage. They take up more space. As you can see, they've got more surface area, they're taking up more mass, they're heavier. So it's just a reality of the acoustic drum set that it's going to take up more space in your actual studio or lounge room or bedroom or wherever you've got it. They're not as portable, and they take up more space when you're transporting. Again, that really fits in with the previous statement. Also, there is also the fact that when you're transporting, you may have to buy cases that go around the drum so that you don't scratch it. So that can be an extra cost as well. And recording is harder or more time consuming. What's required to record the acoustic drum set is a microphone. They don't have any inputs or any ways that you can actually connect a computer system up to them. So a good old-fashioned way is to actually use a microphone, and that can be a lot harder. It can be very time-consuming. And the last one, this is just something that's happened to me many times. They can leave marks on the floor, and particularly underneath the bass drum on both legs and also the hi-hat, there are some spikes that help stabilize the drum kit so it doesn't move. I've seen some pretty vicious marks on the floor and scratches in nice polished wood floors because the owner was unaware of it. A lot of students actually buy a rug to put under their drum kit for that very reason. So we'll talk some positives now about the electronic drum sets. Volume control. Again, this is a really big one. It sort of fits in with the negatives for the acoustic drum sets. But this really comes in two ways. One, you can have it hooked up to an amplifier in which you can have direct control over how loud it can be. Or number two, you can actually have headphones on so that no one can hear you whatsoever, and you can have it as loud as you like. And no one can hear you. So that's a real positive for a lot of students and particularly parents. They take up less space. You can see there it's not as massive. Yes, okay, it still takes up a little bit of space, but it's certainly a lot more efficient in the use of its space. Quality pre-recorded samples. This is a really important one for me. There's a lot of pre-recorded samples that have been put on there for different styles of music. So particularly if I was going to play some of the dance or electro styles of music, I would definitely go with an electronic drum kit because you can quite quickly achieve a sound that would be very hard to emulate on an acoustic drum set. Not prone to scratching or dents. Sure, they can get scratches on it, but it's not as big a deal. There's no nice, really shiny finish to destroy. They take up less space in transportation. Again, that's pretty self-explanatory. They're not harsh on the sticks. You're not hitting cymbals that are made of metal. You're hitting the cymbals that are made of rubber, and you're hitting pads that are often made of rubber as well, or they're easy to record via MIDI. MIDI is a system that you can connect your module up to a computer and do instantaneous recording without use of microphones. They have applications outside of drum set playing, so that means that the sounds you can use don't just have to be drum sounds. I've heard of performers before actually recording whole string sections and basically triggering them off at the right time. So let's talk negatives now for the electronic drum set. They're generally more expensive than the acoustic drum set. They're not as touch responsive. I mentioned that before. There are occasions where you might hit it and it may not trigger at that particular velocity that you've hit. Wires can break and degrade, and certainly if they're in the way or you're walking over them all the time, they can certainly be prone to breakage. It needs electricity to function, so that I mentioned that one before. Needs amplification, so that can be an extra cost, an unseen cost. I've had students before who've bought their drum kit and then realised later on that they've had to buy an amplifier in which to get sound. Of course, if you don't want to do that, you can just go with headphones. But if you're wanting to play in a band setup where you're playing with other people, then you do need amplification. Sensory moving parts are not as robust, particularly the pedals. I've found because they're sensory and they're having to sense when you're triggering them off, and they do have moving parts. I've found that they are more prone to over time breakage. Connections can wear out, particularly if you're connecting it and unplugging it all the time. And they can have a slight delay in sound. As you can understand, if you're hitting the pad, it's triggering that up. It's traveling up a wire to a module, and then it's going out of the module into an amplifier and then playing the sound. That's quite a way for it to go. So you can hear slight delays in sounds sometimes, depending on the actual electronic drum set that you've bought. And the last one, this is just something that I've found sometimes, depending on the model, some models will not play two sounds at once. So if you're hitting, say, a bass drum and a snare drum together, there have been sometimes I've found on some models where they won't play the same two sounds at the same time. So thank you for watching buying your very first cheap beginner drum set, part 2. I hope you can join me on the third part, much more information on the acoustic drum set. Thank you very much.